Are you investigating whether some of the cuts to the federal government left key vacancies at the National Weather Service or in the emergency coordination?
No, they did not.
They did. I'll tell you, if you look at that what a situation that all is, and that was really the Biden setup. That was not our setup.
We were here around the table when Hurricane Helene struck, and I did not hear Jesse Waters, who I'm thrilled is back around the table, saying that Donald Trump should stop spreading lies about the Biden administration and the FEMA funds.
Oh, that's gotta hurt!
Now, she recently tuned into the Murdoch-owned network responsible for radicalizing boomers akin to how they felt video games would radicalize the youth. You'd be hard-pressed to find updates on the heartbreaking tragedy unfolding in Texas, but what you will find is just riveting discussions on how the new Superman, a movie based on a fictional character who comes to Earth from another planet called Krypton, is too woke in how it perpetuates the immigrant agenda. That's right, let me reiterate a story about a fictional superhero coming to Earth from a different planet and being fielded for being different is too woke.
I went to the Yankees at Mets game yesterday at Citi Field, go Yanks, and you should see the people sitting for the national anthem for God Bless America. It's really just, I can't believe that we've come down to that. And I don't know, we don't go to the movie theater to be lectured to and to have somebody throw their ideology onto us. I wonder if it'll be successful.
You know what it says on his cape? MS-13.
Wow.
Is it superimposed or it actually says that?
It is super.
Just on the knuckles.
Superimposed.
One more thing is up.
However, during Fox News 5 when the topic pivoted to something that has rocked the nation, the deadly floods in Texas, liberal voice in the panel, Jessica Tarlov, reminded her co-hosts who were playing the Stop Politicizing Tragedy card who the person was that was spreading lies and disinformation regarding FEMA during Hurricane Helene. This, of course, when Biden was in charge. It was Donald Trump. But now they're suddenly clutching their pearls at the mere mention of how this tragedy could have potentially been preventable.
In light of the floods, do you think that the federal government needs to hire back any of the meteorologists who were fired in the last few months?
I wouldn't know that. I really wouldn't. I would think not. This was the thing that happened in seconds. Nobody expected it. Nobody saw it. Very talented people are there, and they didn't see it. It's, I guess they said once in 100 years, they've never seen anything like this. So I wouldn't, people are trying to blame the school. They're trying to blame the camp. They're trying to blame, it's just a horrible thing. But no, I wouldn't say that, no.
Tarlov approached the subject very carefully, noting from the top that it doesn't negate from the tragedy itself to discuss what countless experts have pointed out. Questions that arise regarding the timeliness of the response.
Listen, this is one of the more devastating stories that I think we've had to cover as a mother of two daughters that are going to go to camp at some point. I cannot even imagine what that feels like. I've been reading the testimonials, especially about the fathers and grandfathers that are walking around that camp looking for a thermos with their kid's name on it or some sign that they were there. Maybe they find the body of another camper, maybe they find their own child or grandchild. Unimaginable. I'm so sorry for them, and I'm sorry for any hurt that any comments about this tragedy has caused these families. I don't think that talking about preparedness or what might have helped qualifies as impugning the memory of those that have been lost or detracting from the thoughtful conversation that needs to take place, because this river has been flooding for a very long time. There are a number of instances in this. And we were here around the table when Hurricane Helene struck, and I did not hear Jesse Waters, who I'm thrilled is back around the table, saying that Donald Trump should stop spreading lies about the Biden administration and the FEMA funds. Trump came out and he said, they're giving your FEMA dollars to illegals. They're housing them with your FEMA dollars. Then he said, you're only going to get $750 from FEMA, which was a complete lie. And there are Republican officials who have testified to the fact that people did not get their FEMA assistance because of what Trump and other Republicans were saying. You also don't need to trust or go to Democrats to politicize it. You can look at this GOP state rep, Wes Verdell, who said that he would have voted differently on a bill that was before the House last year. I think it was House Bill number 13, that was going to add more money for disaster response and better alert systems, radio towers, et cetera. There are over $54 billion in identified needs in terms of disaster resistance when it comes to these kinds of flash floods that state officials are asking for, and the GOP legislature has rejected them. That is something that they can work on to move forward and hopefully avoid a tragedy like this again.
And called to attention how Texas Senator Ted Cruz literally inserted language into the Republicans' big, beautiful bill prior to its signing by Donald Trump on Friday, language that eliminates $150 million funding to, quote, accelerate advances and improvements in research, observation systems, modeling, forecasting assessments, and dissemination of information to the public around weather forecasting. Was it ever communicated to you that there was a need, that it was a priority, have a warning system, so people had a chance to receive something like this?
But listen, I think anytime you're dealing with major rivers, there's a risk of flooding, and there's always been a risk of flooding, particularly on the Guadalupe River. I will say, in the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame their political opponents for a natural disaster. And you see that with a hurricane, with a tornado, with a wildfire, with this flooding, where people immediately say, well, the hurricane is Donald Trump's fault. Look, that, I think most normal Americans know that's ridiculous. And I think this is not a time for partisan finger pointing and attacks.
What's your response knowing the state and cuts to the NWS in recent months by this administration?
So I don't know the source for what you're saying. All of the public reporting I've seen is that there were two alerts that went out, one just after 1 a.m., one after 4 a.m. I can tell you, I talked about the partisan finger pointing. I think there have been some eager to point at the National Weather Service and say cuts there led to a lack of warning. I think that's contradicted by the facts. I think it is reasonable over time to engage in a retrospective and say at every level what could have been done better, because all of us would want to prevent this horrific loss of life. But I think just immediately trying to use it for either side to attack their political opponents, I think that's cynical and not the right approach, particularly at a time when we're dealing with a crisis and we're dealing with grief.
Now, of course, this bill, it doesn't go into effect until 2027, but the point remains, right? Like, why are we cutting more funding in the future to deal with readiness? I mean, not to mention that more than 600 employees have exited the National Weather Service amid a Trump administration push to shrink the government workforce, leaving many offices short-staffed of meteorologists and other support workers. And around a fifth of all full-time workers at FEMA are also set to depart.
Well, according to our CNN reporting by our colleagues, Andrew Friedman, Emma Tucker, and Mary Gilbert, there are two offices of the National Weather Service in Texas that are closely involved in forecasting and warning about flooding on the Guadalupe River. Those are the Austin San Antonio office of the National Weather Service and its office in San Angelo, Texas. They are missing some key staff members, but they still issued several watches and warnings about the flood danger. Tom Fahey, he is the legislative director for the National Weather Service's Employees Union. He told CNN that while he believes the offices had, quote, adequate staffing and resources, the Austin San Antonio office is missing what they call a warning coordination meteorologist. That's a role that serves as a crucial direct link between forecasters and emergency managers. We can also tell you that this morning, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said she is not aware of any breakdown in emergency warning systems that could have contributed to the high death toll. But Kerrville City Manager Dalton Rice says officials there are committed to doing what he calls a full review of events and the systems in place after so many questions have been raised about emergency notifications and evacuation guidance. Wolf, this has got to be a completely forensic review of this to figure out what may have broken down here.
But pointing this out, according to the professional goalpost shifters that be in the Republican Party, is politicizing tragedy. But when Trump literally spreads misinformation that puts people at risk of trying to obtain FEMA funding in the middle of a catastrophe, that's not politicizing tragedy.
But he's pointed out that it's damaging the rumors that is what is happening, the rumors that are circulating. And with regard to that, things that the former president has said is FEMA funds were stolen to be used to house illegal migrants, that no one from FEMA was on the ground in North Carolina, that funds were being withheld from Republican areas of the state on purpose. None of that is true. The head of FEMA says that worse than it not being true, it is dangerous that if this is pushed and circulated for the people who are most in need of help. With that knowledge, is the former president going to stop saying this?
Well, first of all, Kate, let me just express our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in Western North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and now Florida, who are bracing for another devastating hurricane. The bottom line is that FEMA spent $1 billion on funding for illegal immigrants that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden let into the country. CNN and many mainstream media outlets reported that more than a month ago. Now, today, we find ourselves in a predicament where Americans are in dire situations in need of food and of water. And Secretary Mayorkas last week said that FEMA does not have sufficient funding to get through this crisis and through the rest of hurricane season.
But Caroline,
speaking of Secretary Mayorkas,
Caroline, I wanted. We just had
Kate.
Secretary Mayorkas on, but no. But first, on that, let's keep to the facts, which is on that suggestion that Donald Trump did make that they were stealing money from FEMA and using it, and it's all gone because they're using it to house migrants. That's not true. There's no disaster relief fund money that was going to house migrants.
I don't think the American people care which pocket the money came from.
And I'll echo Paolo's comments on the matter, pointing out that resources for weather forecasting, as well as broader work to understand the unfolding climate crisis, is set for further cutbacks under the Trump administration does not distract from this horrific tragedy. It sheds light on how ill-prepared we will be in the future, again, if a tragedy like this is to unfold. I mean, when you look at the Trump administration's 2026 budget proposal, it seeks to dismantle all of NOAA's weather and climate research labs, along with NOAA's entire research division, meaning this would halt research and development of new weather forecasting technologies. It sounds insane, but calling this out doesn't negate from the heartbreaking death toll that continues to grow. Saying nothing just means you're ignoring the obvious.